Go onto your hands and your knees on the floor, with your knees directly under your hips and your hands directly under your shoulders. From here, you're going to walk your hands forward between 5 and 6 inches. Then shift your weight forward so that your shoulders are directly over your wrists. Don't let your shoulders pass your wrists at any point during this exercise. At this point, there will be just over 90-degree angle at the hips. Using the muscles at the front of the hips, you're going to tip your pelvis forward to place an arch in your lower back. Once you've done this, let your shoulder blades completely collapse together as your chest sinks closer to the floor. Make sure that you do not bend your elbows while you're doing this. This might be tricky at first, as depending on how your shoulders move, your elbows are really going to want to compensate and not let you do both at the same time. This should get better over time, but make sure that you do not sacrifice by bending the elbows. Once you've got the shoulder blades dropped, the elbows are straight, and your pelvis is tipped forward, allow your head to completely drop and hang. You're going to hold this position for the recommended amount of time. If you have trouble or pain being on your wrists or your hands, you can drop down to your elbows. The rules here are slightly different. You want to make sure that your elbows are directly under your shoulders to start. They should be shoulder width apart. But you're going to separate your hands wider than your shoulders. Keep the palms facing each other. This time, you're going to shift your weight back slightly so that your hips go over your knees. Once you're there, tip your pelvis forward so that you have an arch in your lower back and use the muscles in the front of your hips to do so. Allow your shoulder blades to collapse, keeping your elbows at shoulder width and your hands further apart. Let your head drop and hold this position for 1 minute. Balance and symmetry check. Pay attention to any differences that you feel on one hip versus the other hip. Do you notice that it's easier to get one of the hips to work than the other? Or do you notice that you can't feel your hips working at all? Do you feel a difference in how easy it is for one shoulder to glide and move versus the other? Maybe you notice that one elbow doesn't bend as much as the other. Do you notice tension in the wrist on one side versus the other, or both wrists? Do you notice pain or discomfort on one side of your back versus the other, or maybe both sides of your back? Either way, take notes, and remember, these are all asymmetries showing up in the body that should even out over time. Lie on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor, pointed straight ahead, parallel to each other. Put a block or a pillow between your knees. Make sure that the block or the pillow is between 4 to 6 inches in diameter, and that the block or the pillow is firm enough so that when you press in against it, it doesn't have the ability to actually squish in. Bring your arms out to your sides at a 45-degree angle from your body with your palms face up. Using about half of your strength, squeeze your knees inward into the block and then release, on and off. You should feel the work in the muscles on the insides of your legs as well as the hip flexors. Balance and symmetry check. Do you feel muscles working in one side of the body that are not working the same in the other side of the body? Do you feel like one leg is pushing into the block or the pillow firmer than the other leg? Or do you feel like the timing of how they press into the block is off? Either way, take notes and recognize that this should change and become more symmetrical from left to right as time goes on. Very lightly contract the muscles of your glutes, your butt muscles, on and off. Notice how you can't see anything else in the body, including the pelvis moving as the contractions are happening. That's because you only want those muscles to be doing the work. Your pelvis should not move. If you notice that your back is flattening to the floor every time you squeeze, you're probably squeezing too hard and you need to lighten it up. Keep your stomach muscles completely relaxed throughout the duration of this position. Make sure you get a full squeeze, hold for a second, and then completely relax between each squeeze. Balance and symmetry check. Take notes of how the differences between the left and the right legs are as you're doing the squeezing. Does one glute work when the other one does not? Or is the timing off? Does one glute squeeze sooner than the other glute? This should even out over time. Lie on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor, hip width apart and pointed straight ahead. Place the bottom soles of the feet together and allow your knees to relax and drop out to the sides. At first, try to keep your feet as close to your hips as possible. If they start to slide away from you, just allow them to go wherever they comfortably slide to and then leave them there. Your knees are going to drop out to the sides and everything in your body should be relaxed. As your knees drop out to the sides, you might notice that there is an arch, a slight arch, in your lower back. That is okay. Your arms should be just out to your sides with your palms face up at a 45-degree angle from your body. Relax completely in this position for the recommended amount of time. Balance and symmetry check. Do you notice a difference in how far one leg moves than the other? Is one knee closer to the floor than the other? You might feel a stretch or some kind of sensation in the muscles of the hip on one leg that's different than the ones on the other. Of course, these are asymmetries showing up and should even out over time. Lie on your back with your feet flat on a wall, hip width apart and parallel to each other. Your hips and buttocks should be anywhere from 6 to 12 inches from the wall, depending on how close you can get where you still have your tailbone and pelvis able to relax flat on the floor without feeling like it wants to lift up. Place a block in between your knees that is about 4 to 6 inches in diameter. The block needs to be firm so that if you were to press against it, it doesn't have the ability to squish in. Hold the block for the duration of this position. Allow your arms to be out to your sides at a 45-degree angle with your palms face up. Balance and symmetry check. Pay attention to your hips against the floor. Do you feel like one hip is higher or in a different position than the other? Or are they both flat on the ground? How about the different areas of your back or up into your shoulders? Pay attention to the difference in the muscles that are working in one leg versus the other leg. Take notes of all the different asymmetries that you can find and recognize that these should change over time. You're going to hold the block with about 50% of your strength throughout the entire duration of the position. Now, bring your elbows out to your sides to where they are at shoulder level and bend your arms so that your forearms and your hands are pointed straight up at the ceiling. Your palms should face the wall and you should make kind of a relaxed fist with your hands. Squeeze your shoulder blades together using about half of your strength by pressing the elbows into the ground. You're going to do this on and off and make sure that you're not just pressing the elbows, but you're actually getting the shoulder blades to squeeze closer together. Make sure that you continue having pressure on the block the entire duration of the position. Balance and symmetry check. Pay special attention to the differences in what's touching the ground. Do you feel like you have one hip that's pressing into the ground more than the other? Do you feel like other parts of your back or shoulders are pressing into the ground more than the other side? As you're doing the presses, do you feel like the work is feeling different on one side of the shoulder versus the other? Pay attention to the way that the legs are pressing into the block. Do you feel both of your hips working? Do you only feel one hip working? Does anything feel different from one side compared to the other? All these are asymmetries that should eventually even out over time. Interlace your hands together and straighten your arms directly over your sternum, locking your elbows out to where the hands are pointed up at the ceiling. Make sure that the palms are together and the elbows remain locked the entire duration. Allow your arms to move over your head towards the floor as far as they can go, where you do not have to apply any force to get them to go further. Once you feel like you need to apply force, stop there and let your arms come back up over your sternum. Make sure that your elbows do not bend at any point throughout this movement. Also, make sure as you're going down towards the floor with the arms that you don't feel your back arch at any point. As soon as you feel like it does start to want to arch, stop there with your arms and come back up. You're going to move back and forth between these 2 points. Make sure you continue having pressure on the block. Balance and symmetry check. Pay special attention to the difference between how one hip feels against the ground versus the other. Also, pay attention to the way that the hips are working while they're squeezing onto the block. Do you feel like one leg presses into the block more than the other? Take notes of how the shoulders feel as they're rotating up and down while you're bringing your arms closer to the floor and back up. As you're doing the motion, do you feel like your back, pelvis, and hips become more even, or do they change and become less even? Take notes of whatever your findings are and recognize that all these are asymmetries and they should get better over time. Stand next to a wall facing the wall. Place your palms on the wall with your fingers pointed straight up. Make sure your wrists, elbows, and shoulders are in line. Your feet should be parallel and in line with your knees and hips. Walk back from the wall and sink your chest towards the ground until you have a straight line all the way from your hands to your pelvis. Using the muscles of the front of your hips, tip your pelvis forward to create an arch in your lower back. Make sure your heels are directly under your hips and keep your elbows locked straight. Once you're here, flex your quads tight and let the weight of your body go a little bit more towards the balls of your feet. Hold this position here. Balance and symmetry check. Do you feel a difference in how easy it is for your chest to sink down into the ground when it comes to paying attention to how your shoulders feel from left to right? Do you notice different muscles along your back that are working? These are all asymmetries that will get better and improve to become more symmetrical over time.